Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to be bringing you my favorite bass players of all time. It is a magnificent 7 of fantastic bass players, but if you're one of my patrons, you're getting a full top 10. So please join me for my favorite 4-string aficionados. Some basses have 5 strings. I'm not going to give you any hints, but the list is going to be as eclectic as ever. So please join me for my favorite bass players of all time. That is until next week when I remember all the guys I forgot this week. Nevertheless. By the way, in last week's episode, it completely slipped my mind that I had another MoFi. This is my 2-disc, 45 RPM Nilsson Schmilsson, which is numbered. I have number 735 out of 4,000 total that were released. And I also have the Super CD, which is also numbered. I have number 2077 out of a total 2,500. One of these things is not like the other. Oh wait, yes they are. Both of these, of course, cut from the same exact digital file. If you're enjoying the content I'm bringing you from week to week and would like to help support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. My first favorite bass player, Andy Rourke from the Smiths. I could have brought up any Smiths album to showcase how great Andy is on bass, but Meat is Murder contains quite a few of my favorite Andy bass lines. A wildly underrated musician, often overshadowed by the brilliance of Johnny Marr. The more you listen to the Smiths, the more you hear why Johnny was able to do all the things that he did on guitar, with Andy providing such a canvas for Johnny to paint upon. Check out the tracks Well I Wonder and Nowhere Fast, which showcase the two extremes of Andy's bass playing, fragile and beautiful, and manic as hell. Peter Hook from Joy Division. I could have showcased any of his tracks on Unknown Pleasures to show exactly why Peter is one of my favorite bass players. But I want to point out Isolation off of the Closer album, Joy Division's swan song, because it features those wonderful high notes upon which Peter built his style, and the speed at which he plays, and the flourishes. I don't care if, as Peter says, he's so unskilled he can't even play songs by other bands. I only want him to play Joy Division songs. And if I have a choice between seeing New Order without Peter Hook or seeing Peter Hook in the light, I will always choose Peter. My next favorite bass player, Joe Lally from Fugazi. I could have mentioned the first Fugazi release because it is so famous for Joe's bass lines, but I'm going to bring up their demo. This album, which they call First Demo, is just that. It was recorded in 1988 when I was still in high school. Hey, we're all getting old. And I like this demo because it shows that even at their inception, Joe Lally was steady as a rock. The band at this point still don't realize that they should let Joe's bass carry both Waiting Room and Badmouth, both of which are on this demo. So the guitars are a bit high in the mix, and Joe's distinctive bass intro is absent from Waiting Room. But I want you to check out the track Furniture. I'll put a link below. It's one of the songs on here that is truly built all around Joe's bass line, and he absolutely kills it. Merchandise and the same, Turn Off Your Guns, this whole damn thing is amazing. And Joe carries a lot of these songs. Up next, Brian Ritchie, the inimitable bass player from Violent Femmes. 9 times out of 10, Brian plays an acoustic bass, an instrument that is oftentimes much larger than myself, yet he still manages to play it with a lilting quality. Brian is fantastic on every single Violent Femmes release, including their debut, which is unassailable. But I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this album, Hallowed Ground. It's even more acoustic than most of their albums, and there's a wonderful rootsy, folkish quality to the music. And I want to showcase Country Death Song and I Hear the Rain, the latter of which is a song that you can even hear Brian sing on. This is one of my favorite Violent Femmes albums, and I think it houses some of Brian's best moments with the band. Up next, John Kale. the Velvet Underground. I want to showcase John on the album White Light, White Heat, the band's sophomore album. All of the fanfare associated with this album usually goes for the title track or the album's amazing closer, Sister Ray. But I want to showcase the 1-2 punch that is The Gift and Lady Godiva's Operation. They're two songs back-to-back that are spoken and sung, respectively, by John Kale. But his bass work underneath his vocals are what really deserve to be called out. For a band that is often lauded for their drone and their crunch and their power, The Gift and Lady Godiva's Operation both showcase just how nimble John could really be on bass. And they feature beautiful melodies. And I happen to really love John Cale's voice. John Cale was good at everything he put his mind to. He could play the cello, he could play the piano. If you threw a strange instrument at him, it would take him 10 minutes to figure it out. But he was primarily the band's bass player, and he's one of my favorites. Up next, Clint Conley from Mission of Burma. Much like with Grant Hart from Husker Du, another fantastic band with two creative leading lights, Clint Conley was my favorite guy in Mission of Burma. Clint was not only the bass player, but one of the two chief songwriters, along with Roger Miller on guitar. And as much as I love Roger Miller's songs, there's something about Clint Conley's songs which speak to me. That's when I reach for my revolver off of this EP, Signals, Calls, and Marches, is one of Clint's finest moments as a bass player. When the song starts out, it almost sounds like he's tuning up. It's just a few plucked strings that sound like they're almost in an empty basement. And then out of nowhere, Roger Miller's guitar and Peter Prescott's drums join in, and the entire song kind of bursts forth in full flower. It's an amazing opening. As a bass player, Clint is very melodic, but there's a beautiful violence to the way he attacks his strings. Another performance of his that I love, that I want to call out, is on the live album, The Horrible Truth About Burma. It's the song Peking Spring. Peking? Peking. Peking? Peking? Anyway, the circular bass pattern that Clint lays down with such speed and accuracy is a pleasure to behold, especially live. And if you haven't heard this live album in its entirety, you're in for a treat. The last member of my magnificent seven of bass players, Graham Maybe from the Joe Jackson Band. He's great on every Joe Jackson album he plays on, but there's something about his work on Look Sharp that has always blown me away. Look Sharp is a great song, everybody knows about it, but listen to the song Baby Stick Around. That kind of song is impossible to pull off without a stellar bass player, and Graham is that. Likewise, the song Pretty Girls. It's almost doo-wop-like in its construction, and it is wholly dependent upon that rubber band-like bass upon which everything else is built. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not call out the album opener, One More Time, and the album's closer, Got the Time. Those two time song bookends showcase just what an amazing bass player Graham is. I'm going to put links to both of those songs below. You should already know these songs, but if you've never heard either of them before, you're going to run out and buy this album. And you should anyway. It's a great album. For the rest of this week's episode, please join my Patreon at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard, or click above for more free content.